Okay, we're recording. Welcome back, everyone, to Hinterland's One Shot, episode 13?
You sure?
Yes, episode 13. Our last episode was kind of crazy. Lots of people liked it, I think, because we got lots of plays on that one.
Well, we intend to go back to that at some point.
We'll touch back on a lot of our topics. Hopefully we don't get redundant if there's long periods between our topics. That is a danger.
There's a lot to say on MK Ultra, and we didn't have a lot of time to get into that today, but tomorrow's your day off too, so...
Oh, are we doing a podcast tomorrow?
Well, I've got time.
Okay, then. So, today, what are we talking about? We'll jump right in to this topic that we're talking about?
Before we hit record, we were talking about some local politics, which, once again, out-of-staters are trying to get their fingers into.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and I wrote this down, I think the biggest thing that bothers me is that people from out of the state are using what is happening in our state as a means to boost their political agendas. Like, hey, I'm on the campaign trail. I'm going to say something about Alaska, even though I've never been there. I don't know what's going on because I'm not a local. I never called anyone. I just saw this random thing from a random news outlet that mentioned a little byline about what's happening, and so we're going to stick that in there because
We're talking about Joe Biden in particular.
Yes, specifically. I don't know if anyone else has said it, but like, why would Joe Biden mention Alaska's little problems? You know what I mean?
Because it's a red state.
Oh, that's right. And how dare the governor do this thing? So anyway, specifically what we're talking about is our local state ferry system.
Our highway.
Yes, it's called the Alaska Marine Highway. The boats that go from town to town along the coast, all these places that are only accessible by air or water. That's it. No roads. For many, many places. I tried to think of a population number for just the southeast chunk of it, and so this doesn't include Kodiak, Yakutat, Cordova. Those are all towns with no roads out or in, just air and water. But not excluding those, all the towns down in southeast, I think the number equals something like 60 or 70,000 people. Because you got to include Juneau, which is 30,000, maybe 40 in the summer because of all the imports for the summer. Mm-hmm. Sitka, that's 8,000, 6 to 8,000. Ketchikan, that's 18 to 20,000 in the summer. Prince of Wales has like 12 communities on it. Most of them are tiny. Petersburg is 3 or 4,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it gets boosted in the summer, but it's quite a lot because people fish out of there and there's a cannery.
Right, and most of these places have canneries. Sitka has 3 canneries, so its population boosts like mad. And the tourist industry, on and on and on. I think it's probably like 60 or 70,000 people. It's a lot. Just between Ketchikan and Juneau, it's 50,000. Mm-hmm. You got all these other communities, so that's a ton of people that. A lot of them fly in with their bags for the summer, but if you want to move here, and there's no state ferry, your only option is a barge.
Yeah, well...
to get your stuff in.
I've seen a number of people on a community page recently asking for numbers on shipping their vehicles, which, most people do anyway. I mean, maybe not most, but a lot of people do anyway.
On the barge?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people do ship vehicles in on the barge. But my thought is, if you have a family and you're moving in, say you're in the Coast Guard, and you're moving a family in, the Coast Guard's not going to pay for your vehicle and then fly you in with all your stuff when you're trying to move your whole house here to live here for years. They're going to get you on the ferry.
Maybe.
That's generally how they do it.
I've seen both. When I still lived in Petersburg, there was a Coast Guard base there, and like half of them were single young guys, and some of them had their vehicles barged from down south, and they came in, and then one guy, when he left, he did take the ferry.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of military families on the ferry, and they may get free passage, actually.
I doubt they do now.
What's
What's funny about
we're on strike. Did we mention that they're on strike?
No.
Oh.
Do you want me to take her?
Well, she may be waking
Around, so probably gonna wake her up eventually. Oh, she went back to sleep.
Maybe.
So, no, we did not mention, I don't think that they're on strike. We just started by talking about local news.
So anyway, that's what we're getting at. We were just talking before we hit record, there are 3 distinct unions that work on the ferry system. The one that has the most employees is on strike, and the ferries are stuck at the docks. They're not going anywhere as of now.
And you used to be part of that union.
Yeah, I worked on there for quite a while, so I have pretty intimate knowledge. And it's a weird thing because a lot of people believe that it is due to our current governorship and his administration that is causing this problem.
Well, and people on the other side of that say, don't these people realize we're in a budget crisis? How selfish.
Right. Well, it's a red state, so although the big city centers are full of blue people, and they all think that shame on Ferry for doing this when we have this. Shame on the governor, that's what they're saying. Shame on the governor for doing all these giant budget cuts. He's ruining our education system, and he's doing this, and he's doing that, and he's slashing everybody's budgets, and people are losing their jobs, and now the ferry is striking, and it's all his fault because he's a Republican, and he's trying to save his money. Which is incorrect as far as the ferry goes. I'm not going to speak to the other stuff, because, local politics, whatever.
Hack and slash.
Right. It's a hack and slash mentality as far as budgets, but, whatever. That's not what I'm here to talk about. The state ferry, their contract for the particular union that is striking, their contract has been in negotiation for almost 3 years, which is a long time. It was supposed to be settled 3 years ago.
Which was during the Democrat administration.
Yeah, it was with the previous administration. So,
who I believe, didn't he run as a Republican just because he couldn't hack it as the...
Parnell?
No, not Parnell.
Walker. I don't know.
I seem to recall...
I'm terrible with local politics. It just bothers me that people are pinning this on the news guy when he's only been in office since last December. This isn't his fault. This is going to happen anyway.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with that is that it's hard not to choose a side in something like this because you and I are in agreement that unions aren't really the greatest thing ever. On the other hand, we understand why they exist, or why they first came about. But what I've seen a lot of from people is a lot of, heart-jerking, tear-jerking. This is so sad. Think of these people who can't get around now. Like, well, I'm sorry, but... if it wasn't inconvenient, it wouldn't make an impact. That's the point.
Yeah, the emotive rhetoric around it is really obnoxious because this is, in the end, this is a matter of attempting to get fair wages as they see it. I won't go into whether I believe it is or not, or maybe I will in a moment. But it's not wham, poor us type of thing. It's hey, we're doing this thing. Hopefully the state caves and meets at least enough of our demands that we stop. That's all that is.
Yeah.
So people are just going to have to wait. And it's up to the people to put pressure on the state now to meet the demands if they want their ferry back, really. So anyway, as I understand it, I said I was going to get into it. As I understand it, most of what the demands are a certain percentage, a wage percentage increase that at least keeps up with the inflation rate of the state as it stands right now. They got bean counters in the union who figured out what the percentage rate of increase was per year for inflation, so you can support yourself. And they mostly just want their wages to stay in keeping with that.
In case
the state doesn't want to do that.
In case people from down south don't realize it is very expensive to live in Alaska.
Yeah, and it's not huge. It's like 1% per year.
It's 1.8% over 3 years.
Okay. So it's not even that. It's less than 1% per year then, right?
I might be getting that. I think I have a screenshot. I'll take a look.
It's real small. It's not like 10% every year, 15%. It's very, very small. It amounts to like $1 per hour increase over the course of 3 years. It really isn't an outlandish demand. There's a bunch of other inside baseball stuff we won't talk about that, but that is the crux of what they're asking for is their wage increase. And there's some insurance stuff, and there's a lot of nuance to it, but it's not humongous, and the state hasn't come up to an agreeable place for almost 3 years. It's wild. So they're kind of trying to force the issue. So now our ferries are tied to the dock.
1.8%. Yeah, that was all they were asking for.
Yeah.
Anyway, so before people
1.8 wage adjustment over 5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like $1 or $2 over 5 years. You work for 5 years, you expect to get $1 or $2 raise in any job. So why not?
Well, another thing is that people who have never been part of unions. I was briefly part of a union in my first job, and I was so young.
Were you?
Yeah, I had to.
Wow, so did I.
Yeah, but I didn't know anything about it because it was my first job. I was young, and I was barely there for more than a year.
Yeah.
But other people who've never done that and haven't been married to anyone who've done that don't seem to understand that when a union negotiates a contract, they lose something too. They're not just saying, okay, give me all of this and I'm giving nothing up in return.
Right. It's literally negotiation. The union on the boats, it's my understanding, before I worked there years ago, they had some pretty wild benefits. And they've given them up slowly here and there as time has gone on. They still have a really sweet package. I won't say what it is, but it's really good. So
Which
I believe they probably could give stuff up, but they don't want to because they have them. You know what I mean? Once you have a good thing, you're not wanting to give it up.
Which, to be fair, Tier 1 state employees, spoiled rotten.
It's pretty wild how good they had it.
And it's no wonder the state is completely broke because of that. It was just foolish.
The Tier 1 spot on the ferry, the vacation time was crazy. It had so much vacation. You acquired, what was it? It's not like this now, so, I said, I won't say what it is now, but the accrual rate for vacation for Tier 1 status people, which only lasted from like 1964 until like 1970 something, 75. No, maybe it was longer than that. Maybe it was like 20 years, 1980 something.
You skated in on the end of Tier 3. Are they in Tier 5 now?
No, I think they're still in Tier 4.
Okay.
But the Tier 1 vacation accrual was something like 40 hours of vacation a month.
Wow.
It was outrageous. It was really high. And that's... I accrued a lot by the time I stopped working there. Tier 3 got a pretty good deal as well, but Tier 1, it's crazy how much vacation they accrued. It was a ton.
Well, they started taking things away.
I can understand them taking that because it was a lot. You didn't work a lot per year, and then suddenly you got all this vacation off.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I think probably over the time they started to realize, oh crap, we don't actually have the money to pay for all this, and all these people are retiring. So they started taking more and more away, which...
It's a little surprising that when the union first negotiated their Tier 1 jazz, when the State Ferry first started in 1964, that they got such an amazing package. I'm not sure how that happened because it's really good. It's really, really good. I don't know if there's anybody in Tier 1 that's left on the system. I think the last one's retired a couple years ago.
Well, so to say from the perspective of, I've seen a lot of posts like these people are all overpaid, they're all unskilled labor, we should just fire them all and get someone else. That's just not true. You have to pay a lot of money to get your certification.
It's true. It costs several $100s, and if you live outside the state, then you have to, say you live somewhere in the middle America, you have to find yourself at a Coast Guard approved training center. Our local college does it here, but I believe they stopped doing the maritime training here in our town, and you have to go down to the next big town to do the training there, which is travel time and hotel time. If you don't have a buddy, to stay with, it's really expensive. The training is like 10 days. So you're in a hotel for 10 days, feeding yourself for 10 days, buying all those certifications. There's at least 3 that are over $100.
You have to keep them up. Some of them are renewed every year.
Yeah, well,
every 2 years?
Yeah, I think one of them is every 2 years, but that's like $10 and 20 minutes at a computer. That's a real easy one. But it used to be there were several that lasted indefinitely. But now you actually have to renew some of the big ones, the more in-depth ones where they throw you in a swimming pool to train with a life raft. You have to redo it every 5 years. You actually have to go redo the training every 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's more time and more money. Every 5 years you're paying to keep these things up. It's not just, you go down the docks and hire Joe Schmo to come work on the boat. Like, it's a lot of money investment and time investment to
Background
get these people
checks.
working. Yeah, it's a federally mandated position with federal credentials, so you get fingerprinted and background checked, and if you can't pass a background check, you've had a felony, then you go under review and blah, 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 blah.
Urine tests.
It's wild, yeah. Yeah, you have to be drug-free to work out there. Yeah.
Which is tough for people now that marijuana's legalized.
Right. So, all that said, the ability of the state to just fire 1,000 people, I guess it's probably less than that, we'll say 600 people, to fire 600 people and then just rehire 600 people to get the system going again isn't feasible. They're not going to be able to do that, I don't think.
We've seen that thrown around a few times. Just fire everybody, hire in state. And that was another thing, is somebody was suggesting that that a whole bunch of people from out of state work on the ferry system. Some do.
There's a bunch of out-of-staters on there nowadays. It used to be all in-state. They used to hire in-state all the time, but they opened that up maybe 6 years ago. They opened it up to people from down south, and they do. They come and work.
And then they quit.
A lot of them wash out, and a lot of them end up just leaving because there's not enough work for them, or they're told there won't be enough work for them in the winter. And Alaska's a tough place to live. Cost of living's high. These people come from down south, They don't have an apartment before they get here, so they're living in a car or something. They're couch surfing and living out of hotels and trying to make a living, and it's rough. It's a rough system.
Oh, and that's the funny thing that you mentioned. They're told there won't be work during the winter, because the last few years before you quit, every winter we weren't sure if you were going to get time off over Christmas.
Yeah.
Because, we just don't have enough people to run the boats.
Now, to be fair, not fair, but fair, I think we can blame the guy who hires, because that guy wasn't there when I started. We never had those problems. Then that guy comes in, all those problems started. So I think that guy is almost directly to blame for the shortage of people. And the hiring practices are wonky. I think it's all his fault, but that's not really a talking point, I don't think.
Well,
it stinks.
There's some blame to be laid at the feet of dispatch too, because one of the complaints from the union is that apparently they think it's cheaper to keep people on for 6 weeks straight rather than getting someone, a new hire, to come in.
Yeah, I've talked to people who, and I don't know if there was a person, I believe there was a person who actually ran the numbers. They did all the numbers for how much it costs to pay for someone's insurance and benefits for a pay period, and figured out that it was actually cheaper to keep someone on and work them for indefinite amounts of time, 10 weeks, 12 weeks at a time. And when I say 12 weeks, I mean 12-hour days every single day. It's
away from your family.
Right. It's not a 40-hour work week where you go home every weekend. It is constant work. It was cheaper to do that to someone and pay them just a gobs of overtime than it was to bring someone else on who wasn't being paid the benefits, the insurance and whatnot. And so they didn't. They just worked these people to death. And I have worked real hard. I made a ton of money with that company. Worked real hard. And it is a company. It's a state job. It's a state ferry, but it is a company. But man, it's pretty intense sometimes. So anyway, this is very reminiscent, but also quite different to something somebody mentioned that I had never heard of. So I looked up an article. Apparently in 1981, Ronald Reagan had some problems with air traffic controllers. So I pulled up this real short article. I'm going to go ahead and read the whole thing in its entirety to just expose people who may not know about what happened with a different union.
And start throwing around, well, I should just do this.
Yeah, there are people we've seen on discussion boards and whatnot on the interwebs surrounding the strike and the local ferry, where people are talking about how they should just fire everyone and rehire. And we've just covered how that's not feasible. But this is what happened in 81. It says, on August 5th, 1981, President Ronald Reagan fired more than 11,000 air traffic controllers who ignored his order to return to work. The sweeping mass firing of federal employees slowed commercial air travel, but did not cripple the system as the strikers had forecast. 2 days earlier, nearly 13,000 controllers walked out after talks with the Federal Aviation Administration collapsed. As a result, some 7,000 flights across the country were canceled on that day, at the peak of the summer travel season. Robert Poley, president of the Professional Air Traffic Controller Organization, sought an across-the-board annual wage increase of $10,000 for the controllers, whose pay ranged from $20,462 to $49,229 per year. He also sought a reduction of their 5-day, 40-hour work week to a 4-day, 32-hour work week. The FAA made a $40 million counteroffer, far short of the $770 million package that the union sought. Reagan branded the strike illegal. He threatened to fire any controller who failed to return to work within 48 hours. Federal judges levied fines of $1 million per day against the union. In 1955, Congress made such strikes punishable by fines or a 1-year jail term, a law the Supreme Court upheld in 1971. To the chagrin of the strikers, the FAA's contingency plans worked. Some 3,000 supervisors joined 2,000 non-striking controllers and 900 military controllers in manning airport towers. Before long, about 80% of the flights were operating normally. Air freight remained virtually unaffected. In carrying out this threat, Reagan also imposed a lifetime ban on rehiring the strikers. In October 1981, the Federal Labor Relations Authority decertified PATCO. So, they had a union. They had outlandish demands. It sounds like that's approaching $1 billion in an extra money package from the federal government because they're federal employees.
Well, that's a lot more in 81 too.
Yeah, it was a lot more money in 81. $10,000 extra to work 1 day less per week. That's crazy talk. It's no wonder Ronald Reagan was probably just, his hair was probably on fire. He was so fumed at this guy, the leader of this union, and then they ended up absolving that union or dissolving it and just taking it away. It's gone, And now I'm not certain now. I didn't look it up, but I assume that there's no such thing as an air traffic controllers union now. You're just a federal employee with certifications and skills, and you do your thing.
Well, and that's not even comparable to Alaska Marine Highway System.
Yeah, it's a totally different ballgame, especially considering that that it would be, unless they're all military folk who know how to operate boats and have worked on boats, like they just get a ton of Coast Guard guys to go work on the boats, they're not going to be able to just pull enough people to operate the boats. Not in the height of summer. I don't think that's possible.
No, it'll be shut down while they all get training.
Right, it's going to be another month.
A bunch of them will get fired when they fail their drug tests.
Yeah, a bunch of them will wash out when they find out how hard the job is.
And Yeah. And the other side of that is what we were talking about before we started recording, is how many accidents are there going to be because nobody's ever taken a boat that large at that speed through Wrangell Narrows.
Yeah, and they may not be able to find enough people who are certified at the high enough certification to actually steer the boats. And we were just talking before recording that there's 3 unions. There's the workers at the bottom, basically, and then there's the officers at the top that are Coast Guard certified officers. They've got the marine engineers side of it and the mates and pilots side of it, who are, the captains and the first officers and the chief mate, the second mate, and all those guys. I don't believe any of them are striking. I hadn't heard that. Therefore, they're all still hired and they're all still ready to steer the boat. So a competent AB can just follow directions. Mm-hmm. But they'd have to find enough of them. That's the problem, to get those boats going where they need to go. Because it's not the AB's decisions as to where the boats go. It's the chief mate and the second mate. They tell the AB where to turn on the con. He stands there and looks out the window and looks at a chart and says left 5 rudder, and the AB says left 5 rudder, and he turns the wheel and it says left 5 rudder. He just does what he's told, basically. Mm-hmm. So if you're a competent AB, you could just hop in there and do it. You don't have to be familiar with water. You just have to be able to follow the directions and have a competent mate telling you where to go.
So,
but they're going to need a lot of those guys. You know what I mean? A lot, who are willing to live in Southeast Alaska. If they're importing them, they're going to have to put them up because people aren't just willing to grab the bags and go to Alaska, especially if the wage may not be enough to pay for, an $1,800 a month apartment in Juneau, a little $1,800 apartment, for your family, because it's Juneau. And
in Sitka, how much is that?
In Sitka, it's similar or more. Sitka's outlandishly expensive.
And if you're in Ketchikan or Petersburg, you miss another day out of your off time just trying to catch the boat to get to a change port.
Well, if you're in Petersburg specifically, and in Sitka, Ketchikan is a change port.
Oh, you're right.
So,
you're right.
So Ketchikan would be fine, but still, the logistics of the thing are just crazy.
By way of a personal anecdote, sort of, the town I grew up in has had their dock taken out more than once by a ferry.
Well, the current's really crazy through there.
And it wasn't necessarily the fault of the person behind the wheel on the ferry. It was because a little fishing vessel got in their way.
It's true. They saved that fishing. They took out the dock and saved the fishing boat. That was the decision someone made. That guy still got laid off for 2 weeks. The captain that happened to. Yeah, I felt bad for him.
Also, a cruise ship once took out a fuel dock. I think the ferry also took out a channel marker.
Oh yeah, it was.
But I think that was
for a long time. It's at a real gnarly angle for a long time.
But I think that was a matter of the current.
Yeah, the current's real crazy there.
But yeah, so I mean, it's not like any old schmo can just, oh hey, I've been steering a boat.
Yeah.
Which
it
I'm
takes
sure
the experience.
I'm sure nobody thinks that, but it's the same sort of deal as saying you can just take a pilot who's been flying down south for years and bring him to Alaska. That's really not the case.
Yeah. It's true. Alaska's a rough place. In fact, as a side note, it's my understanding that Alaska Airlines, their pilots who land in Ketchikan and Juneau and the outlying towns, they have to ride co-pilot forever before they're allowed to come in and land in these airports. Like, the training for landing in Southeast Alaska is intense for airline pilots because it's such a weird place to land.
Which town is it where it's always scary to land? Doesn't matter the weather.
Sitka's pretty gnarly. You're thinking of a place up north. I forget where. There's a place up north that they have crosswinds all the time. They basically land their jets sideways. It's crazy to watch. I forget which airport it is though. Yeah, Alaska's a scary place. It really is. the local pilots in the small planes, they have a long training period too. Because even local pilots are, you can't just hop in a plane and fly around and expect everything to be hunky-dory if you're not familiar with the way the wind works in these mountains. They're tall. They come right out of the ocean. And then we have really crazy air inversion sometimes. And there's always updrafts and downdrafts right next to mountains where you're always flying because everything is right next to a mountain.
Yeah.
You've got an ice field, a huge, 1,000,000-acre ice field right there on the other side of the mountain range. That causes really weird weather patterns because it's cold air coming down into the warm air from the summer. It's just wild. It's a wild place.
Right in the middle of you saying that, I thought of something to say and I just lost it.
Oh, my word. So yeah, that's kind of all we had. I jotted some notes, but they're no good.
That's what we
might just ignore them. That's been on the forefront of our thoughts at the moment because it's interesting and weird, and I just stopped working there not long ago, so it's real familiar to me. I ran into a couple of old coworkers just the other day at the store who are not from here, but they are living here because
they're stuck.
Because they can't go home. If they go home, they may miss the chance of going back to work when this whole thing stops. So they're just here.
Well, Evan went home.
Yes, but he's a short flight away. These other guys can't just hop on a small plane. They have to hop on a jet to get back. Yeah, it's a weird situation, and I'm real glad I'm not part of it right now.
Yeah, we kind of see it as another sign that, yep, this was the right decision.
Yeah, it feels like Providence
because
that this is happening right after I stop working there.
Because the part of that is that people are acting like, Alaska Marine Highway's just throwing a hissy fit, and they're all taking their vacations, and we're all missing out on our plans to go places, and people need to get around. And,
oh, yes, because the strike is a vacation.
Fest is happening. These people aren't being paid.
Yeah, getting stuck in a town where you don't live for an indefinite amount of time and not getting paid for it is vacation, in giant air quotes. What if you're in debt and you depend on your checks?
Yeah.
That next check may not come. I got a friend who said the last strike they did with Alaska Marine Highway was in 1971, and it lasted 20 days, which is...
whole pay period.
It's over a pay period. It's a pay period and then some.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of change. Like, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you just missed that one.
That's your whole mortgage payment.
Yeah, that's your whole mortgage payment. Gone. Yeah, pretty wild. And potentially, you're stuck in a different town in a hotel the whole time, paying for expensive food because hotels have garbage for amenities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super weird.
So... there's our local news for
there's the local news
today.
I hope people in India and Ukraine love this slice of local Alaska news.
I've been telling you a lot recently. Something that irritates me is Alaska seems to be showing up in national news a bit more recently. And what irritates me is that every time it does, I see people making stupid, ignorant comments. And I'm realizing Alaska is kind of a joke to people down south.
Yeah, Alaska's interesting that way because it's unique, and therefore you really don't get a sense for it unless you're here a while, and because of that, hardly anybody has a sense for it unless you live here. There's only like 400,000 people in the whole state, and it's absolutely gargantuan. It's huge.
People really don't have any idea how big it is until they try to fly here.
It's nearly inconceivable how big this landmass is as far as the state goes. So when people make blanket statements when all they know is, the valley of LA, some Democrat that grew up in LA, and they end up making statements about Alaska, they're speaking out of ignorance.
Speaking out of where the sun don't shine.
Yes, and it's painful to hear people talk about Alaska when they have no idea what they're talking about.
So a few years ago, a friend of a friend at the time decided to just up and move to Alaska, get a job. Didn't have a job, didn't have an apartment, didn't have a plan. She just came to stay with a guy that she knew.
Smart.
Yeah. Anyway, so she was here, and to be fair, she was being very proactive trying to get a job. She pulled up Google Maps and she said, "So, how long does it take to drive here?" I said, "So where are you trying to go?" And she pointed at Haynes. I'm like, "Yeah, you can't drive anywhere from here.
You can
drive the end of the road.
You drive part of the way there,
and then put your car in the water and swim.
Then you can drive down the boat ramp and get your submersible or your amphibious car, and then you'll be in the water for 10 hours because those amphibious cars are slow."
Which there's another funny story about the ferry system. Is well, not the AMHS system, but years ago somebody tried to drive down the ramp to get to the Ketchikan airport, right?
Oh yeah, the Ketchikan airport is on an island, and you have to take a ferry to it, which is one of my least favorite things about Ketchikan. I hate that airport. Anyway, some out-of-towner who I believe had come in on the state ferry, probably, with their car, was following their little Magellan. Maybe it was a rental car. They were following their Magellan, their GPS system, trying to get to the airport, and it said turn here, so they did. It was a boat ramp.
Yeah,
the Google Maps or whatever, the GPS map, actually had a route to drive to the airport. You can only do that if you can drive on the seafloor. It's not going to work.
I remember when we were on our honeymoon and we tried to route to get from one place to another, and it took us to a ferry. It took us to
the ferry, and we didn't know how to use the GPS, so it brought us to the ferry port. But that was fun because we found a little antique mall. That was kind of cool to look at.
We did not end up taking the ferry.
It was freeform travel anyway, so you expect things like that. That's the whole point in that sort of travel. To find random weird stuff you've never found before. Any other things to talk about? Any other points? Talking points?
I don't know. Like I said, it just bothers me that people seem to...
We can talk about...
Alaska's the whipping boy.
We can mention our 2 favorite dumb questions from tourists.
Why is the glacier so dirty?
That's one I was going to mention.
Shouldn't they clean it?
How come they don't clean the glacier off? It's so dirty. Well, go up there to that glacier. You're tiny.
We walked for 2 hours.
In fact, it looks dirty, but most of the dirt are giant boulders that are as big as your head.
Yeah, we once... Didn't we walk for like 2 hours across the ice?
We did. We tried to walk across the lake to the glacier, and it was
little wind tunnels.
It's like 2 miles or more to get to that glacier. It looks close, though.
It did not get any bigger the whole time
It didn't get closer. We walked halfway. We must have walked halfway across the lake, or maybe not even halfway, because it didn't get any bigger. Yeah.
And then we kept running into
really big.
Little wind tunnels out there. We were not dressed for it.
Yeah, it was kind of a foolish thing to do. Walking on a frozen lake in the middle of winter at dusk.
Yeah.
We're smart.
Well, to be fair, dusk was like 2 p.m.
Other favorite question asked by tourists. How high above sea level are we when they're walking along the shore, or they're in a boat, or they're standing on the dock? How high above sea level are we? I've heard that while working out on the Alaska Marine Highway. How high above sea level are you? You look over the side. Well, you're about 40 feet up. 40 feet. That's how high above sea level you are. Congrats. If you go down 3 decks, you'll be 10 feet. That's the ocean. There it is. What's wrong with you?
I feel like there's another one. I don't know. And people, a reoccurring thing in Alaska is moving the capital. So was it last year? There was the earthquake, or was that earlier this year?
I don't know. We've had several earthquakes in the past 3 or 4 years.
Well, I think it might have been the beginning of the year. Regardless, there was a big earthquake up in Anchorage, and news down south reported that there was a lot of damage from an earthquake in Alaska's capital. Anchorage is not the capital.
Did they say that?
Yes.
Oh, we didn't have any damage in the capital.
They said Anchorage was the capital, and I think they corrected it eventually. But the thing is that for years there's been talk of moving the capital to Anchorage.
I'm sure a lot of people think that the capital of Oregon is Portland.
I didn't think that.
I know, but I'm sure a lot of people do, because it's a big city.
Yeah.
Granted, it's only like an hour drive. Salem's basically a suburb of Portland. It's real close. It's right there. So it might as well be.
Well, I couldn't tell you the capital of most things, but you'd think that a news agency would at least get that right.
Yeah.
But, so they're always talking about moving the capital, and for most part, most people are against it, and we're ambivalent about it, because then all the state workers would leave, housing prices would crash, our house would be worth a great deal less, we'd still owe the same amount.
We'd be in negative. We'd have a flip. They call that an inverse mortgage or a flipped mortgage.
Are you sure?
Our house would be worth less than we'd be paying. It would suck.
On the plus side, the houses on Rich Peopleville might get, way cheaper.
Yeah.
There is a neighborhood,
Rich Peopleville.
it really is. You drive up there and you feel like you're down south.
They're all so nice, yeah.
They're massive. They all have big, lawns attached. Like, you feel like you're in a different town. And that's what's weird about most places in Alaska I've been, but especially here, is you're in a good neighborhood and you go down the road to a stop sign and you look across and there's the ghetto.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a result of just the layout of these towns. We're all built on the ocean at the base of mountains. So things are like compacted and weird and strung out. Other cities are like flat. There's rivers, but they have big flat areas, and they build giant neighborhoods in those flat areas. And they have gated communities. Here it's like we've got a valley that's flat, but it's not that big of a valley. And the places where people live there's not a lot of room. At least the city doesn't open up a lot of land to make a lot of room.
Yeah, every time they open up room to build, they build condos.
Even Rich Peopleville, just down the hill, there's some very low income apartments just down the hill from it. It's not far. It's literally walking distance. You can be in the ghetto.
Well, Rich Peopleville's pretty high up there.
It's way up the hill. Yeah, you gotta go way up the hill.
But yeah, most of the land that's been opened up recently has been turned into like Clone Village.
Oh man, there's so many condos. So many new condos have been built in the past few years.
And low income housing. And I wonder how much of it has to do with, we wanna spruce up this neighborhood. Let's sprinkle in some low income with some other people. And people don't like it. It lowers their property values. You can say people are being snobs all you want, but you don't want people who do not own their homes and don't care about their property then living next to you if you want a nice neighborhood.
Yeah, it's like that guy we talked to the other day who was like, yep, the neighbor's nephew is selling drugs out of their place. He's like, I just bought a condo here. And I was like, oh, that's nice. He's like, yeah. He's all bummed out about it.
Yeah, another retiree.
Yeah.
From the Ferry system.
I think he's very introverted. He likes his original wilderness home. He's from the island, so
yeah,
he's used to having the wide open forest as his backyard instead of the neighbor's condo, which is on the other side of the wall from him. Is
me too.
Got the drugs sold out of it. That's not his bag. He's here for his extended family. So,
well, the town I grew up with, town in quotes, I grew up in, has a drug problem, has a rising criminal problem, has a homeless encampment now.
Oh, a whole encampment?
Apparently they're just like hanging out on somebody's property.
They're allow them to do that, huh?
I don't know. Every time I talk to my parents about it, it's just police department's not doing anything, despite the fact.
I got a broomstick in the closet that would keep people from being on my property.
Ugh. My parents. So I grew up on an island outside of town, but my mom has to teach in town. My parents finally stopped buying fuel because it kept getting siphoned. Like, they just used electric heaters at my mom's place of work because they kept getting the fuel siphoned.
Yeah, that's a bad sign.
And the police department wouldn't do anything about, the homeless encampment nearby, nor would they do anything about abandoned vehicles that people just kept putting trash into. Like, that vehicle, you've heard of the experiment where somebody put a vehicle in a crappy neighborhood and waited, And one day, so then they smashed a window, and within like no time, tires were missing, windows were beaten out, like it just got wrecked. And that happens, you know, if you leave a vehicle long enough, especially here, I've seen it, people leave their vehicles, like bits of the car start disappearing in a hurry.
Yeah.
Near your office, even.
Well, yeah, if you need parts, there's always a vehicle there with parts. You just go down with a wrench and start wrenching. And
how do we get into crime?
I don't know. Homeless people and migrants, we already talked about that.
We were talking, we started by talking about the capital moving, maybe housing prices crashing, how whenever they open up property, it's always just for people to build condos.
Developers, investors, those people. I'm sure they have their own private land. Yeah. But none of us can afford it because they always buy it before we can get to it.
Again, Alaska is massive.
Condos on them.
Mostly, you know, completely.
I wonder if there's still any homestead laws. I'll bet you there are.
I don't know.
Because you used to be able to come to Alaska and occupy a chunk of land. Doesn't matter where. Go find a good one. And there were like allowances and rules in place to where if you did the right things, you could own that land. It doesn't matter where. Literally anywhere, as long as it was like, you know, the right kind of land. Because we have three major entities own land. There's the state, there's the mental health trust fund land, there's the native land. So federal, pardon me. There's federal, there's mental health, and there's native. The federal would be the Tongass National Forest. You can't build there. The native land, you can't build there unless they sell it to you, which doesn't happen very often because they use it for income, you know, the wood and the mining and whatever. But I'm not sure how the homesteading thing works. But
probably just for natives.
You have to be no. Anybody could homestead. Anyone. Yeah.
But that was way back when.
Right. I believe those old laws are probably not available anymore. Those old rules that they made for that. But you see some really fascinating houses around Southeast Alaska, out in the middle of nowhere, just out in God's country, sitting there on this super, super nice chunk of land. It's all developed by hand, you know, because they couldn't get a backhoe in there to start moving rock around, no excavators or whatever. But the rules are were like you have to have a foundation, and you have to show that you've been progressing and developing over the course. You have to live there and make progress and have a foundation of a house within like 5 years, and then you own the land. It belongs to you at that point.
I doubt that exists anymore.
Yeah, I kind of doubt it, but I've seen a couple of the properties, and they're always in the coolest locations because you get to pick. You get to go wherever you want and pick the land you want. So sometimes they're in really wild places.
Tell them to tear it up.
It's true. Well, I mean, you can't just squat any old place. You can't just go down the road and pick a piece of woods and go up there and build a cabin. That's really, really against the rules. And it's too bad. Homesteading is cool. But I kind of doubt, I agree with you, I kind of doubt it's allowed anymore. I don't think it's a thing anymore.
Well, considering you can't even dig a hole in your backyard if it's considered wetlands.
I know. Wetland things.
That.
Extra dumb. Yeah.
We're in Alaska. It's all wetlands.
I know, it's all wetland. There's also like 100 million acres of land in Alaska. Come on. The amount of space that people occupy in this most rugged of landscapes is minuscule. It's so small, and they quibble over the dumbest environmental things.
Well,
for instance, when I was growing up, there was this little itty-bitty stream. It was a trickle out of the hillside. This itty-bitty little stream. The salmon were dumb enough to try and run up it every year. My buddy and I used to go down in like late August when the salmon were all slimy and stinky and gross. Start and throw rocks at them. We're teenagers, you know. Start throwing rocks at salmon, see if we could kill salmon, watch it float back out in the bay or whatever. apparently that's highly against the law because it's harassing the fish. It's a trickle out of the hillside that salmon are stupid enough to swim up. Therefore, it's a salmon stream.
Are you going to get arrested
it's
for
highly
harassing
protected.
salmon, 20 years later?
No. I didn't say where it was. Also, it's very remote and hard to get to now. No one's there.
Well, I'm saying, are they going to come after you?
No. They'd have to know what my podcast feed name is. But yeah, rules like that. I mean, come on. You could literally step over this stream. It's not a creek. It's a little itty bitty stream. So rules like that are extra dumb.
Well, and the thing is that they're building people on top of each other, like bugs. They're squishing everybody into these towns that aren't really expanding outwards. They're just squishing inwards.
Yeah, the cost of land bothers me. If it's cheap, well, the thing about land is everyone knows that if you have a ton of money, land is a great thing to buy. Mm-hmm. You buy land, put a thing on it, and sell for 3 times you bought it for, and make a killing. But if you don't have a lot of income, and you want a piece of land, you're screwed because the guy with lots of money who does this for a living is going to find it and buy it before you do and put a thing on it and sell it for 3 times as much as it's worth.
Yeah, it's going to be...
And you're not going to be able to get it. It's almost like... And as much as I'm against the rules, I'm against the government making rules. It'd be nice if they had rules like, hey, here's a bunch of ground. It's only available to people who make less than $100,000 a year. Sorry. You know what I mean? That'd be nice. And you have to apply and prove that you make less than $100,000 a year for so many years, and then you're eligible to buy it. That'd be nice, because then the little guy has the ability to buy the land for less than
we should have bought
what
land.
the big guy wants to sell it to you for.
We should have bought land on the island a few years back, but we weren't even engaged then.
And all those pieces are double what they were, and no one lives out there. I believe there's only one house, even though there was 8 lots, and one of them right now is I looked them up recently, one of them is actually a peninsula. You could own a peninsula on that island. Yeah, it's a shame we couldn't get one. Oh well. So, anyway, we've rambled. It's late.
Wasn't there anything else we wanted to touch on?
I don't know.
Did we want to talk about Epstein being suicided almost?
I guess so. I feel like we should dedicate an actual episode towards those weird shenanigans. Kind of shoehorning it in if we talk about it now.
That's true. Okay, we'll plan on us talking about that maybe tomorrow.
Oh right, there's our local cast. Maybe someday we'll have 3 podcasts. We'll have video games and news that it doesn't concern us, and Alaska. And the Alaska one will be the most popular one. But right now, this is Oneshot. This is the Alaska episode. I'll give it an Alaskan title, because all we talked about was Alaska.
But you know what? Alaska needs its image spruced up a bit.
That's right. By the same turn, if you're listening to this, don't come here, because we don't like outsiders.
No,
I'm kidding.
We just don't like people from California.
You can get on one of those fancy... You and your California hang up. You can get on one of those fancy crew boats, those cruise ships, and sail to Alaska in the pristine blue waters and all those weird descriptives they give Alaska.
But don't wear a fur-lined hat or all the locals are going to laugh at you when it's middle of summer.
Yeah, it's warm here. Trust me. I talked to a guy on the phone. Did I tell you this?
No.
I talked to a guy on the phone the other day. He was support for something I was calling about. Lived on the East Coast, I believe. And he's like, oh, how's the weather there? And I was like, it was 85 degrees 3 days ago. He's like, wow, I'm surprised it was that warm. And I was like, bro, they get to 95 and 100 in Fairbanks every year. That's 700 miles north of me.
Yeah.
He's like, what, really? I'm like, yeah, it gets warm here. It's summer like anywhere else. Come on.
Yeah, I had an interaction like that on my author Twitter with somebody a while back. I don't know why we were talking about weather. I think it was just a random question somebody was asking, and I said that I couldn't live somewhere without rain, and that mentioned that we lived in the rainforest. Like, oh, really? It must be really damp and cold all the time. I'm like, no.
Yeah, we went for like a 3-hour hike in our flip-flops and t-shirts the other day, and it didn't even faze us. Like, no big deal.
We were dying.
Yeah, we were too warm because we were hiking up a mountain in our flip-flops and t-shirts.
Yeah.
It's too humid and hot out right now. I actually do. I preferred it to be a little cooler. It's been real sticky around. So anyway, there's a weather report. I was just closing up. We keep talking.
Sorry.
Follow us on Twitter at hinterlandsfeed. Email us at thehinterlandsmedia@gmail.com. Watch us on YouTube if you want. There's no video there, just audio. And it's auto posted. What do you want to say? Say what you want to say.
Can I plug my books?
Go for it. Plug your books.
If you have kids and you like to read aloud, I have written 3 children's books. 2 of them are in a series. Forget about the first one. It needs to be edited and given a new cover. But they're called The Adventures of Tonsta, and they're loosely based on Norwegian troll tales, because I'm from a Norwegian family who grew up in a Norwegian American town, and I love all things Norway. Anyway, they're about a little boy in a red cap who goes on adventures and meets trolls, meets a dragon at one point, and they're very clean, very innocent. I'm currently reading them to our oldest child, and he started to request certain stories, so that makes me feel really good. So,
okay, yeah, that's true. Buy our books. Do it. It helps fund the podcast. Kind of. You're not gonna be able to plug your books every time, though.
I know.
It's a special occasion.
I'll plug the young adult novel, maybe in like 10 episodes.
There you go. For our 20th episode.
But just don't let the people on my personal Twitter know that I'm a Christian conservative, because a lot of them, I try to avoid politics on that Twitter.
Yeah, you save it all for Hinterlands One Shot.
Well, every now and then I say something on Meme the Lefts. I think I commented earlier and I showed it to you. I was like, do you think I'm gonna get in trouble for this? It was really innocent, but people are so ugh.
Yeah, people are mean. That's the takeaway. Alaska's awesome. Their politics aren't fun to talk about, and people are mean.
Okay, I can tell you.
I'm closing it up. You keep talking. I'm closing it up. Okay, that's it. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Goodbye.